Latin from scratch, the deponent verbs. This is quite related to the passive voice, which we studied in the previous class, but it is different. It is similar in the morphology, but different in another way. Let's see, okay? Now, you probably don't know what this deponent means. What does deponent mean? It doesn't matter what it means. What matters is how it works, okay? So, here I say, which are a special kind of verbs with passive morphology but active meaning. Okay, so that's like the opposite. Like the morphology is passive, so the verb looks passive, but the meaning is active. Okay, and now inside this kind of special verbs, you see that we have three categories. Like 95% will be in the first category, and then we have like smaller categories. So let's start with the active deponent verbs, or just deponent verbs, okay, because they are the most common, so just deponent verbs. Active deponent verbs are conjugated in the passive voice, but their meaning is active. So in English they are translated as active, okay, obviously. These are the most frequent deponent verbs, so we usually just refer to them as deponent verbs. We don't have to specify active deponent verbs, no. They are conjugated just like any other passive verb, so passive morphology, normal. They are easy to spot because the first form of the statement ends in "r". Well, you remember that, for example, amor, I am loved. So amor. So here we have examples of statements of some frequent active deponent verbs and the meaning. No? So for example, the first conjugation, we have miror, mirari, miratu sum. You see that the whole statement is passive, but then the meaning is active. Okay? So I wonder or I admire. Okay, you see that actually admire is the same root. Okay? Another example of second conjugation, polikeor, promise. This is a false etymology, but the way I learned this when I was a teenager was that polikeor has to do with politicians who promise a lot. Okay, it's not connected to false etymology, but it's good to remember the meaning. Third conjugation, utor, use. Now, use in English and in Spanish and most languages, we use something, direct object, so we would expect accusative, but no, utor plus ablative, okay? Mixed conjugation, patior, so suffer, bear, endure, etc. And potior, so careful with patior, potior, okay? They look very similar, but they are different. So patior, potior, which is obtain, take possession of, plus ablative, again, okay? Notice that some verbs have their object in the ablative case, while others can have it in the accusative case. So the verb is transitive, even if it's passive morphologically. So what this means is that, for example, here is like suffer something, direct object, so accusative, okay? So even if it looks like it is passive, but no, it is not passive, it is deponent. So a deponent verb, even if it looks passive, it can have a direct object, it can be transitive, okay? Now, other verbs are not transitive, they have the object, the obligatory object in the ablative, okay? Two different things. Then, passive deponent verbs. We were studying the active, now the passive, and this is pretty much the opposite. Are conjugated in the active voice but have passive meaning. They are few and infrequent. Pretty much these three only. Okay? So vapulo, which is be flogged, so you can imagine how frequent this is. Then exulo, be banished, or veneo, be sold. Okay, so these are not, this is probably the most common is in comedy, plotus, etc. No? So like all the slaves, they are, flogged, people are banished, sold, whatever. Okay, and last, semi-deponent verbs. are those which are deponent only in the tenses corresponding to the perfect stem. These tenses have passive morphology, while the rest of the tenses have active morphology. That's why they are semi-deponent, so they are half deponent. In all the cases, their meaning is active. Okay? Now, some frequent semi-deponent verbs. Fido, so you see that this looks active, okay? Everything here looks active, but then the last form, fisusum, it looks passive, but it is always, the meaning always is active, okay? So fido, confido, like you see that is pretty much the same verb, but with a prefix. So trust, trust, diffido, of course, distrust, audeo, dare, venture, gaudeo, similar but different, okay? So gaudeo, rejoice, enjoy, and soleo, used to do something, be wont, be accustomed to something, etc., etc. Okay? So with this, we've finished the deponent verbs, which for which, of course, we need to know the passive morphology from the previous class. That's it. It's really not so complex. It's just a matter of paying attention and not to confuse deponent with passive. That's it. Okay, so now let's go to the practice and practice.